Hey everyone, what's going on? Rob from Captain Rob Games here. Today I wanted to discuss some tips that can make you a better survivor. Now I know that with the Chapter 20 release of Resident Evil, we have a large amount of newer players that are coming to the game. These tips will be great for them. Some of them might be a little bit advanced. And even if you're someone who's been playing for a while, I'm sure you'll find a couple tips in this video that maybe you didn't know about or things that you could work on or could improve on. Now these tips are going to branch on a couple different things. Some of them are going to be micro, meaning your ability as an individual player to do things such as chase. And we're also going to talk about things that are more macro, such as controlling the general area of the game, which generators get completed first, who goes for unhooks, who works on generators, managing the sort of team component of it. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. So you know the deal. If you like this content, if any of these tips help you, let me know in the comments section. Also, in the comment section, let me know any types of videos that you would like to see me make in the future. And as usual, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button for more content like this, and let's get right into it. Alright, so the first tip that we're going to be going over today is what I call third-person peeking. Now, an important thing to note is that the survivor's point of view is third person. The killer's point of view is first person. This means that if the killer were to stand right here, they would not be able to see past it, presumably, whereas as a survivor, I can actually see around it while completely hiding my body. So if the killer were directly in front of me, I can see the killer. Right now, the killer cannot actually see me. Now this is useful for hiding and evading the killer, but this is also incredibly useful in chase. If you're looping this, for example, you can use your camera and you can bend it in different directions as you're going around to get a good area on, or excuse me, good idea on where the killer is. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. Now you see as I turn this corner, I use my camera, I keep my eye on the killer to see where they're at, to see if they're following me directly or if they're going to be doing a mind game of some sort. And you can do this in a lot of different areas. So remembering that you are third person and the killer is first person, you do have a field of view advantage. This is an incredibly important thing to manipulate. Because if you stand, for example, if I were to drop this pallet and position myself right here, the killer cannot see me. The killer does not know where I am, but I can see if the killer is kicking the pallet or if the killer is going to the left or if the killer is going to the right. So I have an informational advantage here. This is a huge advantage that survivors have. It's very important, and you need to make sure that you're abusing this when in game. The second thing you need to do, now this is mostly geared for newer players. A lot of newer players will just look straight ahead of them because it's easy. It's hard to manage a lot of different things, right? But as you play the game more, and you can even open up a tutorial and just practice moving around, you want to get to the point where you can look behind you and run, and not run into things like I just did there. And this way, when you're in chase, you'll actually be able to see the killer. Now this is going to be incredibly important to know when the killer is doing mind games, as well as to know when to slam pallets, when to keep running, etc. So your ability to look behind you is incredibly important. Now this is something that you're actually going to have to practice. This is going to end up becoming a muscle memory issue because right now I'm holding my W key. When I turn my camera around to the side, I'm now holding my D key. I'm holding my right key because I'm looking forward and I'm moving like this. Now, when I want to go like this, I'm holding my S key at this moment and looking directly behind me at the killer. So you're going to want to start, I should have altered that. You're going to want to get into a place where you do multiple of these things. Did he just mind game? Did the bot just mind game me? Bro. Anyway, you're going to get to a situation where you're going to want to be doing both of these. W, look forward, know where I'm going. S, look behind me, look for killer. W, forward, S, look behind me. And as I'm doing this, I'm touching A, S, A, W. A, S, A, W. D, S, D, W, D, S, D, W. And basically, sometimes you'll be holding W and D if you want to go with this, D and S if you want to go with this angle. So you want to be controlling where your camera is, and as you practice this more and more, you'll get familiar, and eventually you'll have basically 360-degree vision around yourself. The killer can only look forward. You, the survivor, can run in any direction while looking in any direction. This, again, kind of takes advantage of the third-person field of view, and it is incredibly important that you do this. This is one of the biggest advantages survivors have. This is something you're going to need to practice. It's going to be a lot of muscle memory. Alright, so for number 3, I just let the killer slap me. and he is going to chase me. Now, there's a couple different things you can do. You can try to outrun him. You can try to get to pallets, get to vaults, things of that nature, to try to slow him down and prevent him from hitting you. You also can try to disengage the chase by hiding. Now, in this case, obviously he saw where I went, so it's pretty easy for him to grab me. But if you see on the ground right there, there's also blood. Let's say I had the perk Quick and Quiet and I hopped into that locker very quickly. Even though I'm in the locker, even if he didn't see me jump in that locker, one, if I fast vault into it without Quick and Quiet, it will provide a notification that the killer will see. Two, if I do Quick and Quiet and there's no notification, the killer will still see blood outside of the locker and will be able to use this to find out that you're in there. And third, when I'm sprinting like this, I'm actually going to be leaving scratch marks behind me. You can't see them as Survivor unless you have a perk that Nancy has, but I'm currently leaving all kinds of red scratch marks on the ground that only the killer can see. It's important to know when you're leaving these scratch marks and how long they last, because the killer will be able to use them to track you. Now, if I were to switch to walking a little bit early, I will still be leaving blood for the killer to track, but I will not be leaving those scratch marks. And so then, I will be able to safely hop into a locker. No notification, because I do it slowly. No scratch marks, because I walked. I will still leave blood outside the locker, and because I'm not running the perk Iron Will, the killer will still be able to hear me. So knowing these kind of things, when it's okay to hide, and when you're actually going to need to just run it out, that's going to be critical, because a lot of times survivors will try to hide in areas where it's very easy to track. A big common mistake you'll see is you'll see a survivor hiding like this. The killer will pretend is on the other side of the rock. If I don't have Iron Will, my character is making noises. So even if the killer doesn't see me and he's walking over like this, he'll hear noises to his right. He'll say, wait a second, and he'll come over here and check the spot out and find you. So you can't just hide near the killer unless you have specific perks that are going to help you do that. Iron Will being one of the best ones. So know what your character leaves behind and how to control that to trick the killer. Now, a more advanced version of this, you can actually leave scratch marks in a direction and then do something different. And if the killer comes in here, they'll see the blood and the scratch marks going up to there. Maybe if they're not attentive, they won't notice outside the locker. They'll think you vaulted with Quick and Quiet or something. So different kind of ways that you can manipulate the killer using it, but it's very important to know what the killer can see and what the killer can't see. Next up, we have being efficient with actions. Now, this one is kind of self-explanatory, but at the start of the game, you want to essentially jump on a generator as fast as possible. The reason behind this is because at the start of the game, as a survivor, you have an incredible advantage over the killer. You have the advantage of having all 4 survivors completely healthy, and the killer has no pressure. So this is the time when you want to make sure that you're getting gens done efficiently. Throughout the entire game, you essentially want to be constantly performing one of the following functions: working on a generator, healing yourself, not paying attention to your skill checks while recording a video and failing them, getting hex totems done, getting survivors off hook, or taking chase. Now, all of these things are things that advance the game favorably for you. Now, you want to make sure you're constantly either working on these things or navigating to the next place where you will then work on these things. So see, in this situation, we currently have a generator done. I don't have my headset on, so I can't hear the skill checks, and so I'm just repeatedly failing them, like a bot. But when we finally finish this generator, what are we going to do? Well, okay, let's try to be efficient. Now, there's the killer. We can either take a chase here, it looks like he's already preoccupied, or we can look for a generator to work on. So I think there's usually a generator in this building, so we'll go look for it, found it, and we want to just start working on it. Now, as the game kind of progresses, you'll have people that are injured, you'll have people that are hooked. They will tend to take priority over getting generators done in most cases. You're going to want to make sure that you're efficiently doing that. You're not leaving people on the hook for like 50 seconds every single time, because that's time that they're not actively doing something. They're kind of in a timeout and they're not being efficient. So the goal is you're trying to help your team be as efficient as possible by working on generators whenever available, healing people when that's convenient and available, and making sure that you're getting players back in the game after they've been hooked as soon as possible. This will help you get more generators done, and if the killer actually brings legitimate, like serious pressure, you will be able to still get the gens done in time. Next up, we're going to talk about managing hook states and injuries. Now, in this situation, all 4 players are uninjured, so it doesn't really matter. But let's say in this situation, I have 2 hooks. If I've already been hooked twice and no one else in the team has been hooked, my job in this situation should be to avoid the killer at all costs. The worst thing that I can do for my team is get knocked out and turn it into a 3v1. Most killers will win 3v1s, especially if there's more than 1 generator remaining. So my main goal is to be as efficient as possible, get whatever I can get done, gen-wise, healing-wise, helping the team, without making myself a liability and getting killed. Now, let's pretend on the flip side that I am the only person who doesn't have a hook state, and every other player on my team has 2 hook states each. Now, in this case, it would be the opposite. I actually should be looking for the killer. I want to be chased, because anyone on my team who gets chased and downed would be taken out of the game. So I would hypothetically try to find the killer, try to distract him. If you get downed, who cares? The important thing is that you're keeping the killer off of your teammates. The next thing we're going to talk about is looping efficiently. Now, there are some more advanced tactics, such as taking tiles or otherwise areas where you can loop the killer or play the killer, and trying to connect them to neighboring tiles. So for example, we have a pallet here. We try to maybe get the pallet stunned, and then we can go towards that structure, or we can go towards that structure and try to find more safe areas. But when we talk about looping efficiently, we also talk about hugging the walls as tightly as possible. Now when I do this, I am running this fairly efficiently. It's not perfect, but it's fairly efficient. We're saving a lot of extra steps. It will be difficult for the killer to catch me. Now watch if instead I do this. You see how much longer it takes me? Now this is a bot. We're in the bot mode, so he might not actually hit me. But do you see how he's catching up to me so much faster this way than if I were to hug it tightly like this? The key is you want to make sure you are always tightly... We'll edit that part out. You want to make sure you are always tightly looping so that you can make the most and get the most time out of the resource, the pallet, that is there. The tighter you loop it, the more times you will be able to run around it before you have to throw that pallet. That's time you're buying for your team. You're getting more time out of your resources, and you're most likely going to do better in the game as a result. Next up, we have identifying what is the most important thing to do right now. Now, usually generators are the answer. You want to be doing generators most of the time. However, if things start to get out of control, you may want to switch over to doing more altruistic plays. When a player is on a hook, having someone on your team moving to get them off of the hook and back in the game should be a top priority. The 4v1 is the biggest advantage that the survivors have, and a 4v1 is significantly easier than a 3v1. For every second that a survivor is on a hook, that is time that they're not doing other things that are equally as important, such as getting generators done. Pretty big deal. I would rather my teammates be working on generators than sitting on a hook. And the flip side of this is that if you also have injured teammates, you can prioritize healing them. Sometimes you might take a generator to 99 and not popping it yet because you don't want to notify the killer of where you are until you can heal your teammate up. You want to be keeping your teammates topped off, and if you're in a pressure situation where, let's say, 3 teammates are injured and 1 teammate is now on a hook, you want to reset. You want to get some players healed back up, because a killer can end a game by slugging all 4 players, even if you're doing really well on generators. So you need to make sure that your team is healthy enough to not just have your game immediately end because you did not take the time to heal yourselves up and get players off of the hook. The next tip we're going to talk about is what is known as 3-genning. Now, in a lot of maps, there will be 3 generators that are closer to each other, and depending on their structure, there may be a middle generator. Now, on this particular Macmillan map, there is a central building, and in this central building, there is a generator. This is a very good generator to get done early, because this generator can be easily connected with any other generator on the map. If there's a generator over there, as well as over there, the killer can create a 3-gen with them. Even if you split the gens, and there's a gen on the other side of this wall, and there's a gen all the way over there, the killer will have a line where at least he can efficiently move from gen to gen and cover all 3 gens in a fairly quick motion. As a survivor, you want to make sure that you are keeping the killer as split up as possible at the end game. 3 gens that are close to each other are much easier to defend than generators that are all across different parts of the map. Your best case scenario as a survivor is to have your final 3 generators, where you need to complete only one of them, have 2 of them be on polar opposite sides of the map. If you do this, the killer will not be able to defend all of the objectives, and you will get the generators done. If, on the flip side, the killer is able to set up 3 generators all close to each other, and they have a perk such as Pop Goes the Weasel that has strong generator regression, you may not be able to break through that 3-gen unless you play it very well and coordinated as a team. So thinking early what objectives you kind of want to knock out with the generators, taking out the middle ones, taking out gens that are close to each other, not doing all of your generators on the same side of the map. These strategies will prevent you from getting into a situation at the end of the game where you feel like you are stuck. So you can be choosy about which generators you do. Generators that are to the center of the map, prioritize them. Generators that are close to other generators that are also not complete, prioritize them. Next up, we're going to be talking about knowing your killer. Now, a lot of this is kind of game knowledge and will come as you play a little bit more. But learning it is important. So each killer has strengths as well as weaknesses that make them the killer they are. So we'll just run through a couple of them real quick, talk about their strengths, talk about their weaknesses. Trapper, for example. Trapper is a standard Mouse 1 killer in most chases. He's nothing special, he's very easy to loop, very easy to control. If you go to an area where he does not have bear traps in place, all he can really do is standard Mouse 1 gameplay. If you go to an area where he does have traps set up, you will not be able to use a lot of things you want to, such as vaults and pallets, because you will be instantly kind of grabbed by his trap. The Wraith, for example, can move very quickly and is invisible. He might catch you at a position, and he'll be able to kind of get to people quickly and travel the map and navigate very efficiently. His weakness is that he is, again, a Mouse 1 killer. He can only hit you with Mouse 1. This means that vaults and pallets can be used against him very effectively. Let's talk about a killer that's very different now. The Huntress, for example, is a slower movement speed killer, which means they're even weaker with their sort of Mouse 1 attack game, but she can throw hatchets cross map if you're good enough, and she could hit you from ranged. So against Huntress, maybe you're not going to respect her Mouse 1 ability as much, and you're going to take more chances, and you're going to try crouch dodging, and you're going to try running loops a little bit tighter. But when you're in the open, you're going to be trying to find a way to break line of sight with her. Because if she doesn't have line of sight and she can't take a hatchet from her position to your position, she can't hit you. So you would play her very differently than you would play against a Trapper or a Wraith, for example. Let's consider now the Cannibal. Now the Cannibal, Mouse 1, but also has a chainsaw. Now, against the Cannibal, your ideal situation is to force the killer to Mouse 1 you. He has a chainsaw which can instantly down you if you get caught out of position. So with the Cannibal, you're going to be using pallets very liberally, and you're going to be trying to find areas where you have vault locations that you can use repeatedly to avoid being instant down by his chainsaw. If he Mouse 1s you, you basically take that as a win. You just want to avoid getting instant downed. Let's look at Blight. Blight is very good against W-King. Blight is also very good at traversing the map. He's very good in loops that are right angles. What Blight cannot do well, especially since they fixed the exploit that allowed him to curve around, is Blight cannot effectively turn and hit something behind him very easily when he is in his power. What this means is that if you're running a perk such as Dead Hard and Blight is charging at you, you can run towards the Blight and then Dead Hard through him, into him, and he can't hit you because he can't turn around. You can also try positioning yourself on the other side of rocks when he is in his power, and whichever side he goes to, you immediately go to the opposite side and run back to the direction that he came from. Other killers, you wouldn't do this because they would just turn around and hit you. Blight, when he's in his power, cannot turn around unless he hits an object. So as you can see, a lot of killers have strengths and weaknesses. They have things that do very well and things that create an excellent counterplay against them. Identifying what the killer's strengths and weaknesses are and trying to focus on their weaknesses is a strategy that will make you a better survivor, and you will last significantly longer in chase. And finally, let's talk about identifying the killer's perks as well as the killer's add-ons. Now, add-ons are going to be a little bit more difficult. Most of them aren't going to be important. Ones that are significant are add-ons that basically completely change the way that the killer operates. So add-ons that expose you, such as the redhead pinky finger from Clown, iridescent hatchet from Huntress, the photo card that the trickster has where you become exposed. Ways that fundamentally change the way the killer plays are great to identify, but we're going to focus mostly on perks here. Perks are oftentimes very visible and easy to identify. Corrupt Intervention, for example, very easy to identify because a giant kind of claw entity hand comes out and blocks your gen. Pretty easy to say, okay, the killer has Corrupt Intervention. Now, when you identify that, we don't know what all of the perks are necessarily, but we know they only have up to 4. So if you see a Corrupt Intervention after the 180 seconds, or whenever it ends, depending on the rank of it, you now know that that perk is gone and they no longer have that perk. So let's say, for example, we see a killer with this build. Ruin is very easy to detect. At the start of a game, you touch a generator, you let off. If Ruin kicks in, the gen will start regressing immediately. You've identified one of their perks. Now, if they're using Undying Ruin, you'll know this because you'll cleanse a Hex Totem, and if the Ruin is still active, you will know that they had 2 Hex Totems. You won't know for sure if it's Undying necessarily. It could have been a different one. It could have been maybe a Devour Hope, and they just so happened to have that one get hit first, but you'll identify that there's 2 Hex Totems in play. Infectious Fright is very obvious because whenever a player gets downed near you when you're in your terror radius, you'll scream. Easy to identify. Tinkerer, the killer will just go undetectable when a generator is at 70%, and he'll also know the location of which generator is about to pop. A killer will come to a generator that's about 80-90% done, and they will not have a terror radius or a red stain. You'll be able to identify Tinkerer. The reason this is so important to identify these perks is because knowing what they have may not be that valuable, it usually is, but knowing what they don't have is equally as valuable. There are many games where I am able to quickly, within the first, say, 2 minutes of the game, identify all 4 perks that the killer has. At this point in time, I now know what they can't have by the very just lull of only being able to have 4 perks. If I've identified all 4 perks, I know that I no longer have to play around No One Escapes Death. I no longer have to play around Blood Warden. I no longer have to play around the possibility of something niche like Nurse's Calling, being able to see me through walls. I wouldn't have to play around something weird like Iron Maiden. Once you've identified all 4 perks, you're basically set because you know what they can do. If you play the game, you have a general knowledge of what the killer does and what the perks do, and you'll know now what they can't do. So these are my thoughts. I kind of threw them together, some ideas that I had off the top of my head about things that most people may know, but a lot of people don't know. I hope that these tips genuinely help you. At least 1 or 2 of them, hopefully, are new to you or things that you're not doing particularly well that you can improve upon. And if it does help you, let me know in the comments which tips you didn't know about. As well as feel free to add tips that I may not have included here. There were many, many tips here that I did not even include. I mean, there's so many things that survivors can do. These are just 10 basic ones that I thought of fairly quickly to immediately help you out. So let me know in the comment section what you think. Let me know about your personal tips that you think would be helpful to people. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Hope to see y'all again soon. See ya.